Hi, I'm Richard from Rayder Rich, and today I'm going to challenge myself. Can I create a cinematic riser in Vital using just one oscillator? But what exactly is a cinematic riser? Well, it is a sound effect used in movies, trailers and music to build tension. It gradually gets louder and higher in pitch, creating a feeling that something big is about to happen. It's like a sound that pulls you forward, making you anticipate the next moment. Risers are made by shaping simple sounds and adding effects that make them swell and rise. They're perfect for adding drama and excitement to any scene or track. So let's make one. For today's video, I loaded up Vital, a free synthesizer plugin inside of Ableton Live, but you can use it standalone as well or in your DAW of choice. For the oscillator, which currently sounds like this, we are going to use not the usual saw wave, but one of the included ones when you download the software, which is called quad saw. At first glance, it's the same and it sounds the same. But watch when I go through this slider, go to the different waves of this wavetable. So one saw wave splits up into 4 and back. This already has some kind of dramatic effect, so I want to use that to its full potential. This oscillator sounds nice already, but I'm going to use this unison to have not only one, but 3 voices playing at the same time. And they will be detuned with the default value of 20%. This is more like what you know of as a super saw. Then the envelope is now for the first envelope, which controls the amplitude of the sound that you hear. I'm going to use an attack of 0 seconds. So the moment you press a key, it will also immediately play. The decay can go to 0, the sustain at 100%, and we're going to have a release value, and you can set it exactly by right-clicking on a knob and go to enter value, and I'm going to set the release to a whopping 5 seconds. So, and by clicking this amplifying thingy, the display is adjusted so you can see the full envelope. So if you press the sound, it plays, and then if I release it, the sound amplitude will go down over a 5-second period. This is how an envelope works in general. I'm going to make a second envelope because the fun of a riser, or actually what a riser should do, is make the pitch of the note you play go up over time. So I'm going to make a second envelope, and I am going to bind it by grabbing this thingy, and I'm going to bind it to the pitch, which is here. So if I now press the note, that's what happens. It's not exactly the effect, but you get to hear that actually the two are now connected together. And I'm going to make sure that I set the attack. I will not only rotate the knobs, I will often right-click so that I can enter a value which is more specific. And I'm going to enter 10 seconds. Why? Well, I want this cinematic riser to become epic over a 10-second period of time. There will be no decay, the sustain is 100%, and the release is short. I will enter 0.5 seconds. So if I press a note now, you will hear the pitch go up. And so forth. Okay? To add some more movement, texture, whatever you want to call it, I'm going to introduce a filter, which you can enable by clicking here. And it's not the 12 dB filter I will use. I will use the 24 dB, which is steeper in shape. And we're going to set the cutoff to, I don't know, 52, I think. No, that's too high. It's probably more like 24 semitones. You will hear that this will work. Of course, I tested a lot of these modulations and these sources beforehand, so I made some notes, and I want to encourage you, if you are going to create something like this as well, to just experiment with different numbers and different bindings between LFOs and envelopes and other things inside of Vital, because you can create something similar but way different. And the resonance, which is that shape that you see here, I'm going to set it to 0. So it sounds like this now. Okay, to make it interesting, I'm going to make this filter open up over time. And I'm using this same envelope to open up the filter also during that 10-second period. I'm going to drag from the envelope to the filter cutoff. And I will set the cutoff, well, it's set to 52. And look what happens when I now play a note. The filter will open over time. So that's what we're going to use. And I also want to introduce some resonance over time, but not by using any manual labor. So I'm going to bind envelope 2 also to the resonance, but not fully. It's now set to 1, which means by the end of this envelope, when it's at 10 seconds and at the highest points, the resonance will be all the way up to 100%. I think that's a bit too much. So by right-clicking here, I can enter the value and do 0.75. So the resonance will only go up by 75%, like this. And so forth. Now, this quad wave sounds like a wave, like a saw wave, until we start changing the wave frame, the index of the wavetable. So I want to automate it. And for that, I'm going to use an LFO, LFO1. So I'm going to bind this LFO by dragging it on this slider. And we're going to have a full slider filter. So it is a value of 256. Why? Because Vital uses 256 frames in a wavetable. And I don't want it to have it like this. I want to use a sine wave with a frequency, not in tempo, but in seconds of, let me enter a value of exactly 1 second. And that's what sounds like this. See? Whenever this LFO goes up in the sine, the saw wave is being split from 1 saw into 4 and then back into 1. Now it does this at a 1 second frequency. So every 1 second this sine will be totally walked through. But I want to speed up this movement of the quad saw the longer we get into these 10 seconds. So I'm going to use this envelope 2 again. You can keep binding things to other things. And I'm going to bind it to the frequency of this envelope. And I'm going to set its influence factor to 0.25. And what happens now is, as the higher we get here in the envelope, the longer we are playing our riser, the faster this LFO will become. So let's see. I like that. And I also looked for some fun ways to modulate between LFOs, envelopes, the oscillator and the filter, because I really want to show you how powerful Vital, or especially Vital, but you could also do this in, for example, in the UVI Falcon, how powerful these synthesizers are and how much you can do with so little, because we're still using only one oscillator, which was the challenge. This oscillator, I want to detune it a tiny bit over time to make it a bit more wobbly, a bit more varying in sounds, because, to make it a bit more dramatic. So to do that, I'm going to apply a second LFO. The more LFOs, the better. I'm talking to you, Mr. the Crazy Wabbit, and others who know this. More LFOs is always important to remember. I'm going to bind this LFO to the fine-tuning of the oscillator. And I'm going to do it with a value of 0.25 to make the changes in the pitch noticeable, but not like too large, because it will completely detune every time, and that's not the effect I want this time. And for the LFO, you can draw in your own shapes, but I'm using the presets here. And for this one, I'm going for growing oscillations, which, as you can see, is an interesting shape to modulate other parameters with, for a bit more variation. What happens now if I play the note? You see here tiny, tiny, tiny pitch changes. I'm going to set this tempo to 1 second. It doesn't have to be that fast, just to bring up the pitch a tiny bit. But as you can maybe see, it's tiny on screen, but you can probably see the pitch is only going up. Tiny bits, tiny bits, tiny bits. But I also want it to go down. By right-clicking on this LFO thingy, I can make this effect go bipolar, meaning we can go in the plus and in the minus. It's a slightly different effect, but this unipolar or bipolar switch can be very important for certain situations, for certain modulations we want to do. Okay, and to make the sound even a little more entertaining or dramatic, I want to change the panning of the oscillator. So it's now dead center, but I want to move the sound a bit from the left to the right and so on and so forth. And who would know, we're going to use another LFO for that. I'm going to bind this LFO to the pan. And again, we're going to make this bipolar so that it goes sometimes to the left and sometimes to the right. And I found a fun preset to use, which is split gate. And I am going to use a frequency here of 3 seconds. Again, you can experiment to your heart's content, but this is what I found worked nicely. So keep an eye on this pan meter. See? It's going from left to right, sometimes a lot, depending on how high these bars in the LFO are, sometimes a little bit, but there is variation in the panning, which makes the sound even more interesting. Now, in itself, this is cool, but for like the real meat of a cinematic riser, we go to the effects page. First of all, I'm going to introduce a delay. I'm going to turn it on, but also put it first, because I want to start with the delay. I will often use the default settings that Vital offers in an initialized patch. You can change whatever you want or whatever you need at a certain time. So to make the delay not too obvious, I'm going to enter a value of 35% for the feedback and also a value of 35 for the mix. Then I'm going to add a little bit of distortion. And I am going to drive the sound, the distortion circuit, so to speak, 12 dB. Then an always a goodie is the chorus, which has fine default values, but I will put the feedback. Oh yeah, feedback is 50 and mix is 40 and the mix is 50. Those are default values and those are actually fine. As these sounds are like used in trailers and like not movie theaters, we want the room to shake a bit. So I'm going to add an equalizer, which is default on the low equalizing, and I'm going to gain to up the gain 12 dB. So you will see here in the graphic that the lower part of our sound spectrum will have a 12 dB gain, which will make the chairs in the cinema like shake a bit more, which I think is cool. I'm going to turn on the compressor just on its default settings because I was basically a bit lazy and it just works. And finally, the oh so important reverb. If I would like really want to go deep with this sound design, I would probably use a reverb plugin inside of my DAW after the sound comes from Vital. So I would not use the reverb from Vital, but I would probably use SparkVerb or Valhalla Supermassive or Black Hole by Eventide. Those are like fantastic reverbs. But I want to make an all-contained sound inside of Vital, which you can basically give to someone else and they will have the exact same sound coming out of their speakers. And I will put the mix of the reverb to 45%. I want to really, really hear it. A reverb time of, let's say, 2 seconds. And the size can go up a bit as well. Let's put it on 60. Make the room in which the sound plays virtually bigger. And now let's hear what happens when we play a few notes. That is one example of how to create a cinematic riser in Vital using only one oscillator. We did it, and now the final part is actually to save it because I really want to not lose this one. So can I still type cinematic riser 1 oscillator? Oh, perhaps like this. And this is a sound effect. And save it. And now it's there for eternity, I hope. Thank you very much for watching and listening. I hope this video inspires you to make a sound effect on your own. It doesn't have to be in Vital. It doesn't have to be a cinematic riser. But please, please tell me in the comments, what did you create after watching this video? I really want to know. Again, thank you and bye-bye.